Please join me in the flag salute.
To the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now read the land acknowledgement. The Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 through 1855, and the subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation, and some were moved to the Select Reservation. It is important to note that all of Lane County was an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area of the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. The Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. Thank you. So we have an agenda review first up, and I have something I need to move around. I'd like to add some time to the equity tool discussion, which is the first item for just a discussion on the agenda. It was set for 10 minutes, and I think we're gonna need 20. So I'm adding 10 more minutes on that. And I would like to remove the working agreements from tonight's agenda since it's so full and it's at the end of the evening. Is everyone okay with that? Just give me a head nod or a thumbs up. Maya? Great, okay, so the agenda's been changed in that way. So now we have introduction of guests. Oh, Mary.
I comment to make. I don't know if it's appropriate for gender review, but I thought it would be here a good time to bring up at the beginning of the meeting. I respectfully request that the speaking time limits, if we still have them, be observed, and that like members of the public, that we limit ourselves to 3 minutes during that time. And I also respectfully request the speaking queue be kept, and that we use a uniform system to let you know, chair, that we would like to get in the queue, that we all raise our hand or we all turn on our lights. This mixed system is quite confusing, and I just hope that that would make our meeting a little bit efficient. Thank you.
Laura.
Can we turn on our lights without our microphone being turned on?
No.
Okay. I thought there was something I didn't know.
So I will ask, I do appreciate that, if everyone would raise their hand, because sometimes I cannot see the lights on the mics, and that also works on Zoom. When people are on Zoom, if they use the electronic hand raise or your real hand raising, so.
I'd like to respectfully request when I turn on my light that somebody remind me to raise my hand.
Come on. Okay, so thank you, Mary. All right, I'm gonna say Superintendent Vanderkart, it's your time for your comments.
Thank you. And I would like to say that they're longer than 3 minutes, but they are not part of the board. So, good evening, Board Chair Newman and board members. The time so many families have been waiting for is here. After a long wait and a lot of anticipation, a pediatric COVID vaccine has been given the green light. The FDA has authorized emergency use of the Pfizer vaccine for children aged 5 to 11, and the CDC has recommended its use. Lane County Public Health continues to be a terrific partner during this long-running public health crisis. Lane County's Public Health Officer, Dr. Patrick Lepke, says that families, pediatrician offices are a good way to seek vaccinations, but not every family will be able to have access this way. So they worked with school districts and other providers and developed their own operational capacity to administer the vaccine. We're working with them to host vaccine clinics for our kids in kindergarten through 6th grade. We'll have COVID vaccine clinics at Arts and Technology Academy on the evening of Thursday, November 18th, and at Howard Elementary School on the evening of Tuesday, November 30th. Lane County Public Health is also holding clinics in other locations around the county, including other Lane County school districts. Parents will need to make an appointment to bring their kids to get vaccinated. The county scheduling tool will be live to make appointments by Friday morning. Lane County Public Health estimates that there are 25,000 children in this age range in Lane County. National surveys say about 1/3 of parents will seek to get their children vaccinated as soon as possible. The Lane County Pediatric Partnership has developed capacity to meet a higher level of demand and vaccinate about 10,000 kids, or 40% in the first several weeks of eligibility. They aim to have at least 4,000 children fully vaccinated by New Year's. We're happy to be part of supporting that effort and making sure our families have access to vaccines. Getting vaccinated is a critical health measure to protect students from getting and spreading COVID-19. It also will help keep students from having to quarantine if they're exposed to a COVID case. We want our students to stay healthy and in school as much as possible. For the record, 4J is not mandating COVID-19 vaccinations for any of our students at this time. Some of our students haven't been just staying healthy and in school. They've been excelling both on and off the field. I want to take a moment to recognize and applaud all of our fall sports teams that have or will be competing in state playoffs this week, including Sheldon and Churchill football, Churchill and Sheldon volleyball, South Eugene boys soccer, and all 4 girls soccer teams, Churchill, North Eugene, Sheldon, and South Eugene. In addition, we are represented by athletes from all 4J high schools in a state cross-country meet this Saturday. Kudos also to the 4J sports teams honored by OSAA for their student athletes' classroom achievements. OSAA's academic all-state teams in the top 10 include North Eugene girls soccer, Churchill boys and girls cross-country, boys soccer and volleyball, and South Eugene volleyball, girls cross-country, boys and girls soccer. Some other teams also qualified with GPAs over 3.0, but finished out of the top 10, including Churchill football and girls soccer, and South Eugene boys soccer. Congratulations to these students and to all of our fall sports teams that have worked hard this fall on and off the field. Last meeting, I was happy to share about outdoor tents being installed at schools to provide cover for outdoor meals. This was moving forward after a great deal of planning and work with our insurance carrier to make it possible to install them at schools that had requested them. Unfortunately, over Halloween, more than half of the lunch tents we had put up on our properties were vandalized so badly we can't use them. They may not be feasible to replace. We'll continue working to keep options for students to eat outdoors and separated as much as possible indoors, as much as we can as the weather turns to fall in the Northwest. I also shared last meeting about the COVID dashboard of current cases and quarantines that our communications team created and launched, working with the contact tracing team. It has been well received by parents and staff and community members, with a lot of appreciative comments and more than 10,000 views so far. One person in another district commented, "This is what transparency looks like. Well done, 4J." The data is updated as cases are identified and tracked, and is available 24 hours a day on our website at 4j.lane.edu/dashboard. We'll also hold a parent information webinar next Tuesday at 5:30 to answer questions about COVID cases and quarantines. All are welcome to tune in live or review the recording later. When we came back to brick and mortar schools full-time this fall, 4J families who wanted to stay online were able to request online learning options that were offered for their grade level. Now, we are approaching the change of terms, and families can request to change their learning option from online to on-site, from on-site to online, or for elementary students between the two online programs. With vaccinations now available for students in K through 6, and the demonstration that we've been able to limit the spread of COVID in schools with conscientious health and safety measures, we expect some families, especially the younger students, will be making the choice to return to school on site. Parents of middle and high school students can request changes for the second trimester until November 15th. For elementary school students, parents can request changes for the second semester that starts at the end of January, and the deadline for that is January 10th. As the school year carries on, our teachers and support and operations staff are working hard to manage COVID-related changes and extra workload. Staff are working nonstop, and in many cases, the extra work brought by the pandemic makes it impossible to complete all of our regular duties. Our 4J mechanics have been driving buses to keep providing service on as many routes as possible, so we don't have to cancel more bus routes. They need a moment to catch up on maintenance, which includes changing oil and checking tire pressures on the buses needing service in our fleet. Our nutrition services team has consolidated kitchens and made constant adjustments to services and menus in the face of short staffing and supply chain demands. They need time to regroup, prepare, and take inventory of what's in stock in their kitchens. Our human resources staff is busy nonstop recruiting and hiring staff to fill shortfalls, including substitutes, educational assistants, food service workers, transportation employees, and custodians. Just since September 1st, after teachers started their work year, we've hired 19 more teachers and licensed specialists, 119 classified staff, 31 guest teachers, and 46 others like walk-on coaches and classified substitutes. At the same time, we work to implement the staff vaccine mandate and process more than 100 requests for exceptions, each with individual attention and consideration. And of course, our teachers and our school staff who are working to keep supporting students through the many challenges of the pandemic. Tonight, you'll hear the results from a recent survey from EEA President Sabrina Gordon describing the overload on teachers and licensed specialists. Our staff need time to catch up, plan, and prepare to support our students' needs. We know this is true not just in Eugene, but other school districts as well. The Portland and Beaverton districts just added no school days in November. Our neighbors in Bethel School District announced yesterday they're adding 5 to 6 no school days for staff planning and preparation scheduled throughout the year. In 4J, we're looking to add 2 no school days in the next few months, scheduled around existing school breaks. Later tonight, I'll officially request that the board amend the district calendar to make November 24th and January 14th non-instruction days. If you approve the change, the day before Thanksgiving and the Friday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day will be no school days for students and planning and prep work days for staff. This will still meet instruction time requirements across the district, except for a couple of hours for our seniors. We recognize calendar changes can create difficulties for some families, so they are never made lightly. We need to give some time to our staff members who have worked nonstop since the pandemic began, doing extra work and not getting to their everyday duties. I thank you for your consideration of this support for staff and for staff to support students. I also want to thank all of our 4J staff for their hard and dedicated work throughout the pandemic this fall. That includes our cabinet and directors who have been working double duty with little respite since the pandemic began, literally 7 days a week and around the clock. You haven't seen senior staff in the boardroom for the past couple of regular board meetings, but you continue to work to see their work behind the scenes in preparing agenda items for board meetings, providing follow-up information, and in all the work of the district. You'll see staff returning in future meetings, either in person or on Zoom, to present agenda items from their department. And I appreciate all that they're doing. And finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that as the seasons change and we all enter the winter months, we need to have an awareness of the mental needs of our community. We are almost 2 years into this pandemic, and the stress on our whole community is real. The stress and weight on our students and staff and families is real, and it's heavy. We need to check in on our kids, our colleagues, our neighbors, and our family members, and let them know we see them, we value them, and we care about them. Our schools can play a role in supporting mental health. Our community is working to expand mental health supports for all. As we move through the seasons, and we hope eventually move beyond this pandemic, we need to continue to support mental health for our students, their families, and the community. Thank you, board, for your ongoing time and service to the 4J community.
Thank you, Superintendent Vandergaard. And now it's my turn as board chair to have some comments. And I chose to talk about something that really was very uplifting to me that happened this week. Ruby Bridges spoke to over 1,000 Lane County students and hundreds of community members last Thursday. It was all done virtually, but her presence and words had a huge impact. It almost felt like she was talking to you personally. That day, shortly after she spoke to students, I got a text from one of my grandchildren. We had not had a conversation before the event. We hadn't even talked about her coming. And it read, "I got to go on a live Zoom with Ruby Bridges," with many, many exclamation points and emojis that were really happy emojis. That really made my heart feel good. Ruby's story is amazing and powerful. At the age of 6, on November 14th, 1960, she was the first Black American child to desegregate an all-white elementary school in New Orleans, Louisiana. She was one of 6 Black children in New Orleans to pass the test that determined whether they could go to an all-white elementary school, and she was the only student transferred to William Franz Elementary School. Ruby and her mother were escorted to school by 4 federal marshals during her first day, and Ruby was escorted every day for that whole school year, to school and home from school by the federal marshals for her safety. The school was in chaos, and white parents boycotted and did not send their children. On the second day, a white student broke the boycott and entered the school when a Methodist minister walked his 5-year-old daughter through the angry mob, saying, "I simply want the privilege of taking my child to school." And a few days later, other white parents began bringing their children, and the protests began to subside. All the teachers except one refused to teach a Black child. The teacher was Barbara Henry, who had grown up in Boston, Massachusetts, and she taught Ruby alone that entire year. Ruby started her activism at 6 years of age, and now, 61 years later, she continues to grow and expand her work and message. Truly inspiring. Today, she's the chair of the Ruby Bridges Foundation, which she formed in 1999 to promote the values of tolerance, respect, and appreciation of all differences. When she describes the mission of the group, she says, "Racism is a grown-up disease, and we must stop using our children to spread it." On Thursday, Ruby's presence and her words to both students and adults were simply stated and profound, and I selected just a few to share tonight. We're not going to get to where we want to be separately, we must do it collectively. To raise our children, the children we want to raise, we need to support the support of one another. We need each other, there's a larger enemy out there. So keep fighting, keep having hope, we are unified. And remember to find joy and always to laugh. So I look forward to hearing our district's plans for observing the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day and a day of dialogue on November 14th. And I know we have some plans in the works. So I just wanted to thank United Way of Lane County and many of our community businesses who sponsored this event. And a huge thank you to our 4J staff and the other Lane County community districts who worked to make sure our students had access. So, thank you. And, oops. Oh, Mary, I made a point of keeping my comments to 3 minutes or less, so hopefully our other board members will take that up too tonight. Okay, now we have items raised by the audience, and we have, great, thank you. We have 6 speakers in person and 1 speaker on Zoom. And I just want to say a few words before we get started. So community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting their request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment, or contact the superintendent's office. The deadline is Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. A timekeeper will show a sign when the speaker has 30 seconds left and when their time is up, and that's Lisa over here. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticism about district observations and programs. For complaints about individuals, the district has a board policy and complaint process. It's really outside the role of the board. We only have 1 employee, and there's really not anything we can do about employee complaints. So we ask you to follow the process that we have. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7707 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. Tonight we have, as I said already, we have 7 speakers, 6 are in person and 1 is on Zoom. And so I think we will begin with our in-person speakers. So the first person is Justin McCall.
Thank you. Like I said, I didn't want to have to come back, but I'm back again. You guys do have the power to terminate anyone in the school district. And again, I am here asking you to terminate Miss Cindy Van Carr, Miss Kitty Hester, Dana Brummett, Jennifer Skinner, because again, our child's health and needs were neglected at school. She came home in pain because her feet were soaking wet all day, asked to call me so I could bring her shoes and socks, and was told no. I have confirmation that, yeah, she was not allowed to call home. I sent everybody emails. I'm done. Teresa is done. I'm here because she is emotionally stressed to the max because of the neglect and child abuse from your guys' teachers. And Miss O'Rourke, I would please like you to quit eating while all of us sit here with our masks on and you keep taking it off to eat. Please refrain from that and have some respect for everybody in this room. Now again, my next step, if this does not get resolved, I will be going to CPS, and every single one of you will be named as defendants because you are aiding and abetting this neglect of our child. I'm done. You've been warned. If this does not get handled, every one of you, and that's you guys on the Zoom too, you guys too, will be on that with CPS. I'm tired of your teachers and principal neglecting my child and you brushing it under the rug. I've already filed a formal complaint. I'm filing another one with the state board as soon as I leave here. You've been warned. Good night.
I just want to remind everyone that the board in no way endorses criticism of staff
You
members.
have power
Public setting.
to get rid of everyone. It is in your policy.
Sir, would you please?
I am done. You guys are done too.
So we don't give up.
Justice is fucking done.
The criticism of staff member in a public setting gives any weight to it because it's simply outside the role of the board process. And complaints against staff members, it sounds like you filed a complaint. That's the appropriate way to go. So let's move on to our next speaker, Janet Ayers.
Janet, you wanna come forward?
Yeah, I don't, I have 6 topics in 30-second increments for my 2 minutes.
Let's go on.
The clock's going, I'm not even up there
No,
yet.
as soon as you say Janet, I'll start the clock.
Okay, thank you.
Please have a seat.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. I have 6 topics. I'm going to try to keep them to 30 seconds so I can complete my concerns within that time. The first one I want to address is speaking to the heinous and discriminatory PPE assigned to religious exemption bus drivers. And it's meant to identify to other VAX drivers and staff and thereby and it also creates oxygen level concerns. Having to double goggle with glasses, putting goggles over. These are only exclusive to RE religious exemption. And as we well know through the media, both vaxxed and unvaxxed are passing the bug back and forth. It's a discriminatory practice. It's meant to ostracize, deprive people of adequate oxygen, especially drivers. It's humiliating to be identified as one that has the scarlet letter on. I encourage the district to get more on board with scientific citations to support your unsound policies when it comes to those that have applied for an RE. Many drivers have left for that very reason. Number 2, OSDA Local Chapter 1 Vice President Georgianne Jones is bringing in, if not brought in, to 4J curriculum with the superintendent's full approval and encouragement according to her letters. 4J curriculum with CRT under the guise of social justice reform. I'm using this time to request and obtain within a week of tonight a full and any all list from K-12 CRT trained teachers, staff, and the adopted teacher-student curriculum purchased and used within 4J over the last 3 years up through today's date. Number 3, to rid 4J of their in-house labor law counsel and the staff from using 200 North Monroe as a business address and placing 4J in-house attorney within a business setting office, and I'm requesting that she's removed and has her own office because the HR department has been directly affected with the hostility and the rulemaking that's coming forth from this in-house attorney who
30
has over
seconds.
8 hours a day to conspire to set up for 4J employees. None of us have attorneys and it's an unfair setting. The hostility is significant. Number 4, 4J school board ceases any and all membership, interaction, consulting from school board associations. The only voice 4J school board should listen and attune to is that of local parents and its citizens. It's local. School board
Time.
association.
Time.
Okay, I got through the 4. I'll save the next 2 for next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Our next speaker is Larry Lewin.
Thank you, board members and Superintendent Sidney, for your commitment to our community. Larry Lewin, retired 4J teacher, former TOSA, now member of CAPE. I support your pandemic responses, masking, distancing, vaccinating. You are following science to protect kids, families, and staff. Tonight, among other big issues, you will discuss 4J's equity lens, a tool that's purpose is to be deliberately inclusive as an organization when making decisions. An equity lens introduces a set of questions into decisions that help the decision makers, you, focus on equity in both process and outcomes. You have voted to use Lane County's equity lens and to modify it as needed, which is an important step forward. I urge you to begin using this equity tool, or equity lens as it's known, in your decision-making on district issues and not let it sit on a shelf. In the past, I've heard many mentions of using our equity tool or our equity lens, but I've wondered how this has played out on your actual votes on key issues. 3 examples. Last year, Kelly Middle School staff requested portable classrooms to accommodate the inclusion of YK Japanese immersion elementary students. The majority of the past board voted against funding the portables. This new board has since changed its mind and voted to fund the portables after listening to Kelly staff and parents. Good, that's equity in action. I salute you. You have an opportunity coming up with votes for the entire North region. Due to historic underrepresentation of that region, we have some serious catching up to do. The equity lens should guide you to fund that region appropriately to close the gaps. 3rd example. Last spring, this board, the board discussed HB 2001, the Stand for Children bill that claimed equity for newer, less senior teachers of color during any future layoffs, but really was intent to limit teacher union seniority. Why do I say this? Because a request for public information of 4J revealed that a total of 2 teachers of color have been laid off and not rehired in the last 10 years. 2 teachers. Now that's too many, but it's an equity non-issue. But several of you supported this measure into becoming state law. That's not real equity. I know all of you agree that equity is an
30 seconds.
essential to undo historic and systemic disparities based on race, class, and special needs. Having an equity tool is an important first step. Putting it to proper use is the next step. I support you in doing this. And I hope that you'll have time tonight to respond to my comments and the other comments of the public speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. John Simpson?
Good evening. My name's John Simpson. I was born and raised in Eugene, and I'm a proud graduate of South Eugene High School. I've been involved in local government for more than 25 years, including service with the Department of Public Safety, Neighborhood Leaders Council, Westside Jefferson Neighborhood, and the Eugene Sister City program. I served 3 terms as an eWeb commissioner, and I'm a former chair of the Lane Council of Governments. My understanding of decision-making compels me to comment on the actions this board took on October 20th. The board majority did a great disservice to itself as a public body and to the district. Of course, I'm referring to the premature action taken on an equity tool listed on your agenda as an item for future action. I'm sorry, but this doesn't pass my sniff test for proper governance. An item flagged for future action should be queued up for debate and information gathering. Action should only be taken after the public chimes in. Ignoring this basic principle defies logic and erodes trust and transparency in the public process. Frankly, the optics are bad. I also want to comment on the disrespect and dismissive attitude shown to 2 board members when they both said they felt left out. To relegate your fellow board members who identify as LGBTQ, including Native peoples and religious groups, into the category of etc. is appalling. It's plain to me the equity tool isn't hitting the mark. In other words, the board majority told these 2 very experienced public servants to become invisible and just trust that it would get fixed. We are better than that, and you are better than that. When you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. I implore you to revisit this item and do the right thing. In '75, I applied to 4J to serve on a committee to develop an alternative high school. The promotional material said a diverse group of people was being sought. Yet, my application was rejected because I'm gay. Thank goodness I'm a badass. I appealed and I was ultimately accepted, but other kids aren't so assertive. Had your properly crafted equity tool been available at that time, I likely wouldn't have suffered the humiliation of this experience.
30 seconds.
In closing, I can't emphasize enough the value of public input. It's the cornerstone of a healthy community and the flagship of appropriate governance. And that's exactly why I'm here providing testimony this evening. Thank you very much for your time and for your service on this board. I appreciate the hard work you do, and I appreciate you hearing me out this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy Boyd.
Good evening. My name is Betsy Boyd. I'm a resident of the district, and my children graduated from Adams, Spencer Butte, and Eugene. I served as a member of the Budget Committee for more than a decade and for 6 years on the Equity Committee. First, I would like to congratulate Alicia Hayes for being recognized as School Board Member of the Year by the Oregon School Boards Association. Alicia earned that honor in 2020. Thank you, Alicia, for 15 years of service to the district, its children, and our community. I admire your clear-eyed, plain-spoken, equity-informed, and pragmatic approach to the role of being a school board member and board chair more than once. Thank you. Second, I am here to voice appreciation for the entire school board. It's no small thing that you are called upon to do. This is a demanding volunteer job. You aren't paid with dollars. There is a lot of labor involved with hearing concerns, developing your own viewpoint, and learning the line between policy making and policy implementation. I appreciate every single member of this board is dedicated to equity and justice, including acting on the demand for a national reckoning on race. Thank you for your service. Third, I am here to ask you to keep the focus on equity, especially as it relates to graduation rates and students' social and emotional well-being. I am asking you to keep Gus Balderas' commitment to using data to make decisions so we recognize the presence of bias in our schools. The facts will help us even as we dig into really using the equity tool. I implore you to recognize the gains the district has already made and familiarize yourself with the reports and strategic planning that point to the problems the district must still overcome. Disrupting systemic inequity is hard. It's hard because sometimes good people do not recognize bad decision-making. I wrote my first letter to the editors in ninth grader at Madison in 1976 about the difference in community dedication to the kids in the south end of town compared to those in Santa Clara River Road. I ask you to remember that a lot of well-intentioned people built a system of school choice that created in our community some of the most economically segregated schools in the state, where there was otherwise no such economic segregation in our neighborhoods. George Russell helped the community to recognize the problem. Together, he and the board revisited the policy of school choice with an approach to implementation that began to fix the budgeting and site management privileges that caused the decades of inequity in our district. Given time, I will email you other examples about the balance between policy and program implementation. Your job is hard enough. Use data to make decisions and take advantage of the resources that are available to you that describe these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. And now we have Harry Sanger.
Sorry, I wanted to make a note about what the last speaker said about using data to make decisions, because that is very important. So hello, Superintendent Vandekar and board members, Chair Newman. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm terrified. I'm terrified about what you said about the vaccine in our children, Superintendent. We need to follow the science. The science doesn't support what you said. From the OHA COVID-19 vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds FAQ, the question, are there long-term side effects from the vaccination? The answer, data from vaccination of adolescents has not demonstrated a significant risk of long-term side effects. And virtually all side effects occur within a few days or most 6 weeks following vaccination, but that refers to traditional vaccine science. Does anybody deny this is not a traditional vaccine, that it is a novel vaccine for a novel coronavirus? What is the question? What does it mean to be emergency authorized as opposed to FDA approved? Answer, emergency authorization is a process FDA can make countermeasures or other therapies available for a public health emergency. What emergency? 2 kids dying in Oregon, less than 100 nationwide, over 700,000 deaths, 100 kids 5 to 11. If the recording of COVID deaths hadn't been modified in the spring 2020 by the CDC and the National Center for Health Statistics, then this number decreases to 6% of 94, or a handful of children in 2 years dying directly from COVID-19, counted the way we have counted other respiratory illness deaths for decades. This is the science. I am available to discuss the sources behind this data. This community perspective is absent among current board members in the Budget Committee and is the type of thoughtful, science-based decision-making that I can help represent if selected later in tonight's agenda. Question, why should I risk vaccination for my child if incidence of COVID-19 in children is so low? Answer, COVID-19 has become one of the top 10 leading causes of death in the US as of October 17, 2021, 1.9 million COVID cases and 94 COVID-19 associated deaths have been reported in children aged 5 to 11. In Oregon, 26,370 COVID cases, 2 deaths. Out of 26,370 documented pediatric cases, less than 1% are hospitalized and 2 recorded deaths. Forcing or even accommodating a vaccine with unknown side effects under emergency use authorization is not following the science. There is no public health emergency in our children. Please stop providing free vaccine trials for pharmaceutical companies. Please stop masking our children. Please let our children learn uninhibited of the irrational fears propagated. Please stop buying into this fear. It's not the science and hasn't been for many months. You guys don't give people enough time, I'm sorry. One need only look at the Virginia gubernatorial race to see the national unpopularity of propaganda campaigns indoctrinating our youth. That election yesterday was a referendum on CRT-based curriculum and unscientific fear of COVID. Parents want to have rational discussions about this, not be told what to do by the school board. We're partners in this decision. Please respect that. In closing, I'll leave you with a question many parents want to know. Can you guarantee not one child will be harmed by this vaccine? And will you accept liability if it does?
Thank you.
Thank you for your sincere consideration of this sensitive issue.
Okay, we have one more person to testify online, Krista Parent.
She's moving over now.
Be with us on Zoom.
Good evening, Chair Newman and members of the board. My name is Krista Parent. I'm speaking to the board tonight regarding 2 topics. First, the board's rush to adopt an equity tool at your last meeting without an opportunity for input from students, staff, or the community, even after repeated pleas by 2 of your most experienced board members, after they very clearly shared their concerns and how they felt othered and further marginalized by the tool. Asking for an additional 2 weeks to clean up the tool and get input from others was a very minimal request. If this is the board's attempt at transparency and support for marginalized groups and deep equity work, this was a major fail. Secondly, the work of school districts right now is so incredibly challenging, from COVID to the outright shortage of staff at every position in the system. The system is maxed out like I have never seen before in my 37 years in K-12 education. We are at a critical juncture in public education, and we as leaders need to provide hope, inspiration, and lead with kids at the forefront of every move we make. The very last thing we need here or in any school system is district governance drama. Study after study shows the positive benefits on student learning when a district governance team collaborates and works together effectively. A school board's primary responsibilities include the development of policy, advocating for public education, and hiring a superintendent. You are in the process of searching for a permanent superintendent. Turnover of superintendents in this state and across the country is at an all-time high. Educators are not flocking to the superintendent path. During this school year, we have 43 districts with new superintendents. That's 22%. Last year, we had 33 districts with new superintendents, 17%. And over the last 5 years, Oregon has seen 146 new superintendents out of 197. That's 74%. The cost to a district when you have to hire a new superintendent takes resources away from kids, not to mention the negative impact it has on staff and students. Just the search alone for a district your size is upwards of $75,000. That doesn't even touch the time it takes for the process and the turnover of other staff in the system that typically happens as a result of turnover in leadership. Good superintendent candidates are interviewing districts and boards as much or more so than boards are interviewing superintendent candidates. Superintendent candidates pause when they see district governance teams behaving poorly, including things like violating public meeting laws, not working collaboratively amongst the board team, inflaming sensitive board district matters on social media, further marginalizing protected classes, and rushing decisions that ought to have plenty of opportunities for input. Eugene School District has had a stellar reputation for more than 3 decades. It has been a destination district for students, families, and staff, and it saddens me to see that reputation eroding. Superintendent candidates are watching. I ask this board to stop and reflect. It's imperative that this board lead with integrity, collaboration, and above all else, with all students and staff at the forefront of your actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Okay, that is our public comment. We have now 2 employee groups that would like to speak tonight. And we'll start with Sabrina Gordon from EEA. And I just want to say Sabrina has asked for a little extra time, maybe because she's presenting results of the survey that will take just a little more time for her comments.
Thank you, Judy, and I might not need a lot of extra time, just a few seconds. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Vanderkarp. My name is Sabrina Gordon, and I'm president of Eugene Education Association. Tonight I have some data to share with you from a member survey EEA conducted last week. We did this survey to gauge educator exhaustion and stress because we've been hearing cries for help daily since this year began, and have had an alarming number of conversations with members who are asking how to resign, retire early, or take a leave of absence. Many of the stories we are hearing are painful, like the teacher who cries in her car every day after school, so that when she comes home, she can try to be as present as possible for her own family. Or the special education teacher whose students want him to co-teach the algebra class so that lessons are presented at their level, but he is so buried in paperwork deadlines and case management tasks that he has to leave the students to manage without his help. So in the approximately 800 survey responses, here's a picture of that data. 90% rated workload this year as either difficult or extremely unmanageable. More than 80% reported that workload and stress are more extreme this year than in any previous school year. Almost half reported stress so severe that it is impacting their physical and emotional health. More than 250 educators said that they are seriously considering exiting the profession. Imagine the impact that would have. How many would it take before some schools or programs would have to entirely shut down? Members reported that the greatest contributions to their stress and exhaustion were heightened student needs, lack of time to plan and prepare, and added work requirements. It is not surprising that nearly 2 years into a pandemic, our students have heightened academic and social emotional needs. Every educator is working as hard as they can to meet those needs, but they need time. Time to plan academic supports, time to connect with students and families one-on-one, time to collaborate with colleagues, time to keep up with new requirements like Canvas. And they actually have less time this year, often due to sub shortages that require teachers and support staff to step in and cover during their planning time, or instead of doing the other important jobs they were hired to do. The only way to meet the heightened needs of our students while also coping with a staffing shortage is to remove unnecessary tasks and give educators more time to do the most critical work. The stability of school programs that our students count on will suffer without more time. 4J leadership has been quick to respond to these needs in some capacity, offering relief before several other districts who have now begun to follow suit. Tonight, this board will consider ways to create some additional time in November and in January. I encourage all of us to keep thinking about how to provide, in an ongoing way, adequate adequate learning time that is more educator driven. Providing quality instruction takes time. When we don't have the capacity to provide the quality and quantity of instruction that our students deserve, which will you decide is more important? My vote is for quality. I hope yours will be too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Peter Trongo from MAPS. Managers, administrators, and professional supervisors, okay.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Vandekar, and the audience. I'm Peter Traba, President of MAPS. Starting tonight, we will be highlighting the work of MAPS members across the district during our board reports. And let's start with human resources. We have 7 administrators and professionals in HR, and their work touches every student and family in our school community. This year, HR has hired over 400 benefit-eligible positions since July 1. Last year, we hired a little over 250 for the whole year. This increase has been caused by program changes, the vaccine mandate, and the availability of additional resources. They've also recruited and hired staff for 3 online programs that currently serve over 1,000 students, and they've developed new systems to cover staff absences. This year, HR has hired 178 new teachers and have recruited, hired, and developed a team of full-time mentors. This team of mentors provides a range of supports for our new teachers, and research and experience tells us that districts with high-quality mentoring programs attract and retain BIPOC teachers at higher rates, and they increase the job satisfaction and success rates of all new teachers. Financial services. We have 9 professionals and supervisors in financial services. They are experts in financial management, budget and reporting, business information systems, and payroll. They support the district's stewardship of federal, state, and local funding by ensuring that we meet audit and reporting requirements for our budgets, financial statements, and grants. They work in a high-stakes environment to ensure that the district remains in compliance for future state and federal funding. MAPS employees in financial services have helped lead the implementation of a new software system, Business Plus, that is much more user-friendly for sites and departments. During the pandemic years, they have been responsible to every pivot to make sure our actions are supported, legal, and fiscally responsible. And finally, the superintendent's office. We only have 1 MAPS employee in the superintendent's office, so I cannot give a general report about the work of a lot of folks. Lisa Fjordbeck was a little reticent about me saying anything, but I cannot miss the chance to say that she is amazing in creating spaces that are safe and friendly. She's the definition of someone who is trauma-informed. One quote she shared with me is that it is great to see how hard people are working. I just want to say tonight that it's great to see how hard Lisa is working for our district and our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always good to take a little time to acknowledge people and their hard work, so appreciate that. And now it's time for our board comments, and I thought we could just go alphabetically tonight by first name, so that puts Alicia up first.
Just out of curiosity, you know how many times that I'm first? Let's go by first name, let's go by last name. Let's go please. I just want to thank all the speakers who came tonight. I think as a board, we are definitely growing and learning how to do our work, learning how to listen to each other and make the best decisions, because we know our behavior on this dais has direct effect on student achievement. And I know I came on board, and I know my other 6 members came on, not to lessen student achievement too, but improve it. So you've all brought very many good ideas. I appreciate hearing the concerns about child vaccinations. It's important for us to be open to hearing people's thoughts and concerns, and I appreciate that. I might not always agree, but if I'm listening, I most likely will wrote something. So I do not have any committees. I do want to just point out though that, I'll catch it another time, actually, it has something to do with later on the agenda. I'll make sure I get it.
Thanks, Alicia. So then next is Gordon.
Thank you. I also want to thank everybody who spoke tonight. I know that it takes courage and it's important for us to hear from people. We'll talk about the equity tool later in the meeting, but briefly, I think that to get more comprehensive public input will take months. We have an equity tool that has been unfinished since 2016 and has been sitting on the shelf unfinished. And I think that it was really important to get to the point where we say, we're going to adopt a tool that we believe is good and put that to use right away while we go through the longer process of public input. Beyond that, I want to talk about the educator survey we heard about earlier. We as a board can adopt whatever policies we want, but policies on paper in reality are only as good as the capacity of educators carrying them out in the classrooms and the capacity of our students to feel secure, be curious, and engage in the joy of learning. Without that, nothing we do here matters. But we don't pay enough attention to that. The results of the survey on teacher burnout are shocking and denote an emergency. More than 250 educators, well over a quarter of our teaching staff, are seriously considering teaching the profession. This is an existential crisis to our schools. And I think it's too easy for us to sit on the board and not really be aware of the depths of the crisis that is felt every day by those in our classrooms on whom everything depends. Excuse me. We know that some of the things that would make education better are things we can't afford, because the biggest corporations and richest individuals in Oregon still refuse to pay their fair share of taxes in order to fully fund the schools. All educators deserve a $20,000 a year raise, I would think, but we can't afford that. We know things would be much better if we could limit all class sizes to no more than 20 students, but we can't afford that either. The most important thing we can do as board members is to find things that can make a significant improvement to the quality of students' education that don't cost a bundle. And there is simply no way to do that without relying on the inside knowledge of the students and educators who are in our classrooms every day. But teachers leave, choose early retirement, burn out, quit in despair, including some of the best award-winning teachers. And we have no systematic program for doing exit interviews to learn what's making people leave and what we could do that would encourage people to stay. For as long as I've been on the board, I've been asking the district to partner with EEA and OSEA in conducting surveys to get exactly at this. I also think we have to hold ourselves accountable to this in the same way that we do for test scores and graduation rates. We need to measure the rate at which educators are quitting our schools and the reasons why, develop strategies to improve that situation, and then measure our progress toward those goals every year. There's no way to solve this problem through an us versus them mentality. Maybe the money part of collective bargaining, wages and benefits, is to some degree an inevitable tug of war between two sides. But doing what it takes to ensure that teachers can attend IEP meetings for their students, that there's enough prep time to do collaborative board planning and avoid teaching out of exhaustion, and creating a mentoring program that will guarantee that every new teacher has a more experienced teacher who helps them learn the job. These are all things we can do and that don't cost a bundle. I was happy to see that all of these are part of proposals that EEA has made in the current round of negotiations. I don't know the specifics of those proposals or anything that's been discussed, but I hope that these are things that we approach not with the attitude that if the union proposes them, we have to oppose them or force educators to give up something else they need as the price of agreement, but that we can engage in these in the true spirit of collaborative problem solving on behalf of doing the best we can by our students. That's a critical first step we can take right now. And I hope that when COVID is gone and everyone's been able to catch their breath, we can get back to talking about a more systematic way to have regular metrics and surveys and to build in this kind of collaborative problem solving to all of how we run the schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. Laurel.
Yes, thank you for everyone who came to talk. I always appreciate public discourse. I don't always agree with it, but I love that I live in this country and we all have a right to our voice and we make space for it to be heard here. We've had an equity tool here for years. The former board, of which 2 members that are still here have 35 years experience between them, has not
made it a priority for this to be used, meaning that we haven't used the equity tool that has been here for years. So when myself and Maya came on the board, it was both part of our platform to make equity part of what needs to happen in this district. Meaning, we haven't seen it, we need more of it. We've seen talk of it, we know there's been plenty of talk, but there's a difference between a bullet point and actually doing the work and making sure it's at the table and asking for the information. It's frustrating. You can have an entire massive amount of tools, but they do no good unless they are utilized. You ask for the information. You say, if staff presents a report, how did you apply the equity tool to this? This has not been part of what is happening, but this is what we want to make sure is happening from now on. So, while I don't speak as eloquently, I hate coming after you, Gordon, but I have the passion to say, this shouldn't be myself, the new Black board member, or Maya, the new Latinx board member, using our emotional bandwidth to push this forward. It wasn't a fight between us and them or any of that. That's not what it is. The fact is it's so paramount that we make this foundational to what we do, and I'm excited that we're continuing this conversation and this will go forward. I also want to speak to my platform also is for working families. And so while I recognize very much when I talk to my son's teacher, everything that is hard and what's going on with the school at school and how much work that they have, I want more time. As a parent, only having 2 weeks to figure out what do I do with my kid on this new day that's off, it really only works for those parents that can deal with that. The reality is we're going to have plenty of little kids that are going to end up at home on their own because parents are trying to figure out what to do and they really won't be able to. And that is equity. How was the equity lens applied to this decision? When they said this is, we put it out as a non-snow day. Well, if it's a snow day, mom's probably or dad, I don't want to be sexist, is at home too. It's not a snow day. While we need the time, I will propose that we do the 5 to 6 days that other districts are doing, that I heard from what Sydney had mentioned earlier, and we spread it out to the rest of the school year, but I would like that to start in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Martina.
Thank you. Well, because I work full-time, I almost never get, am I on or not on?
No. Green.
I'm a whole new color that's not red.
Give it a second, Martina.
Thank you. After a year of this, more than a year of this, the Zoom today is working just fine and our physical built infrastructure isn't. So thank you so much. Because I work full-time, I almost never get to participate in events, but I was able to take some time off work last week to see Ruby Bridges speak, and I am so glad that I was able to attend that amazing event, and even more glad that so many of our students got to participate. And it's fitting that that happened this past week, and that tonight, thank you, Sid, we'll finally be able to discuss a proposed 4J board resolution encouraging solidarity and support for student identities. And one of the amazing stories that Ms. Bridges shared was about what happened after she made it through that melee of enraged white supremacists at the school gates, how she was lucky enough to find herself in a classroom with a teacher who demonstrated how much she valued Ruby as a person. That story was such a perfect example of how teachers change lives, especially when they are given the support and the tools they need to support and honor the identities and experiences of their students. So I hope that we will soon be able to pass this resolution so that the board and the whole district can be united in demonstrating just how much we value the identities of our students. And I'd like to offer appreciation today to the Newburgh Education Association, who filed a lawsuit today to protect the rights of educators in the Newburgh district. The actions of that school board have harmed the Black, POC, and LGBTQIA+ students in the district, and I'm so proud that the Newburgh teachers are continuing to demonstrate to all of their students how much they value them.
Thank you. Martina, now Mary.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I wanted to thank Superintendent Vanderkar for talking about the community mental health as we move into the holidays, because that's something that I want to talk about tonight too. You know, as we return to a more normal regular school year with kids in school, it's time to focus again on the social emotional health of our students. And I want to commend Superintendent Vanderkar and the staff for the work they have done thus far and the work they're planning to do to address that. The groundwork for a lot of this work that's being undertaken right now was laid before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, basically turned all of our lives upside down. But I think we should all be proud of the work that the district is doing, including the source of strength curriculum that's now being used in the high schools and the elementary schools. And the idea is to help students help each other. It's very important. I also want to talk a little bit about the work the district has done with regard to suicide prevention. And I would encourage all of us to take another look at the video that we were shown back in, I think, August. It's very powerful. I think it's really important that we become more conversant about that. And finally, the district is training social workers that were trained to connect with families before the pandemic hit. But again, we're just starting off on a lot of this work that has been, the groundwork has been laid for a long time. And I do want to call your attention to, maybe I'll send a link to this, but this is a report called The State of Mental Health in America. And there's a bunch of measurements they take in each state. And Oregon, sadly, is 51st, include the District of Columbia, out of 50 from 151. So in other words, we're at the 5 on so many of them. And one that's particularly striking is youth mental health. And with youth experiencing multiple depression events. So I think there's a lot to be done. I think the school district, because we do see the kids a lot, we are going to be a primary player, we are a primary player, and I encourage us to continue that work. And I hope we can reach out to our community partners. Lane County is a behavioral health agency in the community, but I think it's something that we all should take seriously. And I was talking to someone today, and this person was asking me, well, what can the community do? And I said, I just think it's important to be involved in our schools, to know the kids. Let kids know that we care about them as adults. We may not have kids in school, but we as a community care about our kids, and that's really important. I also want to talk a little bit of time about the meetings I did have this week. I am on the Eugene Education Foundation board. I'm the board representative, and we spent 2 hours talking about the awards. I can't reveal any of that now, but grants will be awarded soon, and it was just a really enlightening conversation about equity among one of them, and I shouldn't say we, I don't get to vote on ex officio, but how the organization hands out grant monies to the different schools and the different applications. I also had a conversation with a City of Eugene staff member, their sustainability manager, to talk about how we can be better community partners with the CAP, Climate Action Plan 2.0. 4G is one of the larger landlords in the community, and we also have a big fleet, and so I think there's lots of opportunities for us to partner on that and move forward with our climate action plan or some version of that, and I hope we can talk about that soon. Last week I also participated in the North Region planning. We talked quite a bit about moving forward. The work is going to begin talking to each staff at Kelly and YG, and then eventually we will be rolling it out to the community. I also attended the Ruby Bridges Zoom meeting. the Ruby Bridges Walk is actually 2 weeks from today, the 17th, so I hope we can participate. I understand the district is working on that. And then finally, I want to call your attention to, we get the Indian Education News every week, or every month, and this is Honor Native Heritage Month, so please do that. And the 14th through 20th is, you're supposed to wear your moccasins, so that's really very important. And I just want to quote this because it's really important, I think, that we remember this. And it says, it means you be killed by the thousands, take our land, force death marches on us, but we're still here. You can put us in boarding schools, cut our hair, forbid us to speak our languages, take away our culture and traditions, yet we're still here. I was born a native and will die a native, and there will be more after I'm gone. We will always be here. So I hope we take that in mind as we do consider an equity tool and realize that the indigenous people were here long, long, long before any of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, I think that was, no, we have Maya. Yes, all right.
So I wanted to cover a couple of things that have been talked about today already. So I also attended the Ruby Bridges, but I'm gonna save my time by just saying it was as incredible as everybody has already indicated. I want to talk today about what Mary just touched on, that this month is designated Native American Heritage Month. And to be honest, I have mixed feelings about these designated months because I worry that they allow us to isolate our learning and not make it a component of our ongoing knowledge acquisition process. I encourage us all, teachers, families, community members, everyone, to remember that we can learn and grow, honor and celebrate Native American heritage every day, all year. And also, just as importantly, to do the same with continuing contemporary Native American life. Native communities should not be frozen in a historical moment. They are alive, and the more we cultivate systems that intentionally carve out space for Indigenous survivants to thrive in our schools, the better we serve not only our Native students, but all of our students. Our Native students are most at risk of being oppressed by our educational system, and we cannot make change until we are very clear about that fact and until we openly hold ourselves accountable. Let's use this month, but let's use every month to make sure we do not allow another year to pass by without prioritizing our most negatively impacted students. Now, as Judy mentioned above, a lesson from Miss Ruby Bridges was to remind us that racism is an adult problem. One of the best antidotes to the poison that is racism is knowledge. And it's up to us to ensure our youth are able to access knowledge in a way that holds impact. So I'm going to risk something here in a moment by making a suggestion to everyone. And this isn't a suggestion to teachers, this is a suggestion to our community, to parents, to folks who are caregivers, to students, to young people. So to my kids' chagrin, I have been paying attention to TikTok, but not just any TikTok, native TikTok. Now that might make some folks snicker, and that's fair, but until you have tuned into native TikTok, I ask you to reserve your judgment. It's developing into a powerful tool by Native youth to disseminate truth and expose folks to reality, both historical and contemporary. I urge you to give it a chance. The young people in your life may tease you for hopping on TikTok, as they do in my life, but it's worth it for this. It's not a perfect resource, but it holds the power to be on the cusp of shifting mindsets. And if your young people have not already landed on native TikTok themselves, I encourage you to share with them so that they can learn, or rather so that you can learn together through what is undeniably a well-loved medium for absorbing content. Reaching students is the goal, reaching young people is the goal, and meeting them where they are at is imperative. So in closing, I just want us to be real that TikTok is where it's at right now. And I encourage you, it's an easy and quick and frankly fun way to absorb really quality information.
Thanks for the challenge, Maya. Okay. All right, so now we are on to our consent group. And we have 2 items on our consent calendar. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the items on the consent group.
Second.
Okay, Martina has moved and Mary has seconded that we pass the items on the consent calendar. All those in favor, do so by raising your hand and say aye. Aye. Okay, it passes unanimously with a 7-0 vote. So we have one item on our agenda, an item for information. And that item is discussion of the 4J's plan to implement the use of equity, the equity tool that we talked about last week. And Martina and I spent a long time trying to talk about and with Maya figuring out how to move forward from our meeting last week. And we've had lots of testimony and lots of comments about this. So let me just begin by framing the discussion. And then we have a couple of questions as a board that we can talk about. First of all, I want to just say how fortunate I feel that we have a board of 7 members who are really 100% behind working to achieve equity in our district. We also have a superintendent and a staff who are ready to do the same and doing it in their daily work. We all agree that as a district and as a board, we've rarely used an equity tool intentionally and never really used one consistently to make decisions. And we want to commit to doing that now. At our last board meeting, we voted to use an equity tool, but we've not really had the conversation yet about what that means or how we will implement this in our school district, which is what I want to discuss tonight with everyone. At our last meeting, there was a real sense of urgency and a need to act and not delay making a concrete commitment to equity. And we did. So tonight we need to take a little bit of time and have a discussion about what this really means for us as a board and for 4J as a district. So just to briefly summarize sort of, I think, what happened and where we are so far, what's happened so far. We voted to use the 2-page equity tool, the short and expanded version, with the addition of LGBTQIA and religion in the text. And we've, thanks to Lisa, who quickly did a draft and of those words added, and it's at the dais right now. And so we can at least look at where we are, and it's labeled draft. That was with the permission of the county. So this 2-page tool was developed by Lane County and developed as part of their larger equity toolkit and process. We voted to use the 2-page tool on a trial basis as we as a district and board figure out how it works in our educational context. So, and then we asked the superintendent to work with her staff to implement an equity tool, starting with this, that works in the school district for the kinds of scenarios and decisions that we face in an educational setting. This would include trying out the Lane County 2-page tool in the decision-making process. Greg Rickoff, who's the Director of Operations and the Lane County Equity and the Lane County Equity Lens Subcommittee at the county, sent a letter to the board and the superintendent to help us understand that their equity tool, that what their tool was about and what their process was. And I followed up with a conversation with him to learn more. So we learned that it took them a year to develop this tool, and it's still a work in progress, as it should be. And there is a 42-page toolkit that accompanies it, which includes specific scenarios from the work the county does with specific ways to apply the tool to those scenarios in county government. He emphasized that the value and utility of the tool has been in the process of developing it, designing and adapting it to their specific needs. He welcomed us to take what we have done and to figure out what they have done and to figure out how it needs to be adapted and changed for the educational decision-making in situations we face in our district. So now what? So first, when we talked about having this conversation, I'd like to really just open up a discussion to the board members about their feelings, thoughts, comments, and any clarifications they need about where we are with the tool and where we are today. And the second question we'll be talking about will be discussing our thoughts and ideas about how we will use this tool as a board going forward. Okay? So, Laurel, you have your hand up, so you have some comments here?
Yes. Well, no, I want a clarification because there is no 2-page long form of the tool, of the equity lens. The equity lens is this short form that we have in front of us, which is basically just the crib notes for what the actual tool is, which is much, much longer. So what you said, what we voted on was not what we voted on. We voted to use the short and long form of the equity, Wayne County equity tool.
So I went back and listened to our vote and I looked at our packet. So actually, if you read the 2 pages, what we voted on and the motion was that we use the short version, which is page 1, and page 2 is the expanded version. And that's all we have in the packet, and that's what we voted on. But we can use the equity toolkit, is what you're referring to, as also a resource, but that was not part of our vote. And it's there and it's part of it and it makes sense. So that's in fact what our action was. So thank you for asking for that clarification.
I would also like to know how many people have looked at the entire Lane County equity tool and the book, all forms of it, because they were included in our packets.
Is that a question to the board?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I have. Maya and Gordon have their hands up. Are you to speak or just saying you looked at it?
I want to speak, but I was also responding to Laurel's question since
Okay.
she sounded like she wanted to know who had looked at it.
Okay. So did that answer your question, Laurel?
No, I only know that I did, you did, and Maya have. Is that it?
Martina.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Larry, or, can I share one? Larry, Misael, and I went through it, and we actually used part of it on a hiring part of it, so it worked out really nice, so.
thank you.
I'm moving this around so I can have Maya and Gordon on the screen at the same time, but I'll just try to watch you up here, I guess, so. Okay, that'd be great. It looks like Maya has her hand up. Anyone else in the queue to speak, just for any comments about the framing of the conversation, clarifications, discussion? Okay, Maya.
I want to respond to what Laurel was just asking about, because I think it's the source of a lot of people's confusion following last week, which was a very full conversation. And I want to acknowledge that being the person who made the motion, I definitely made it, and it stands so that it is the 2-page form. Although my understanding of using that is that is there is the supplementary information that needs to be accompanying it. Now, whether we get to the point where we vote to use that formally and we commit ourselves in public and oblige ourselves to, or whether we can come to an agreement where we all say, yes, this is a valuable resource and it would be foolish to adopt the other one without committing to also looking at this document, is something that I think we need to talk about in this space. I do think it's important to note, it sounds very daunting to hear how long it is, because it is 42, 46, however many pages, but at least half of those pages are all examples of situational tools. So like Superintendent Vanderkar just mentioned, they used one specifically for hiring. So it's not information that you have, it's not like it's an academic text that's 42 pages long and will take you hours to read. It's very full of important information in the first half. In the second half, it's full of examples of the tool that can be used in a specific context. So I think that it should go hand in hand. Unfortunately, I did not include that in the motion. So Judy is correct in that sense, but I think it would be detrimental to our progress if we just pushed it aside because it wasn't in that conversation.
Well, thank you. I think that's partially why we're having the conversation. I think the board went away because and people were thinking different things in their vote and in the words that were used. So we're just moving ahead from here because I think we all want to proceed with doing this. And after talking to Lane County about the toolkit, it is there. Superintendent Vanderkar and staff have been looking at it. It's a resource, but it's very clear from the county that we need to also make it our own and see what works in an educational setting. They applied it, so it's available. I don't think we should need to they're going to be using it and looking at it for scenarios. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. I think it has some good information. So I want to be sure that everyone has their first shot at speaking. If they want to, Gordon's hand is up. Now you're both on my screen. Thank you. Gordon.
Thanks. Thank you. I feel like I'm dense. I don't mean to be dense, and I really don't mean to be argumentative at all. I kind of don't get what what we're doing in this discussion, despite your good framing. As my understanding is, we voted to use this tool in the meantime, and that there is going to be, as lots of people said, right, there's going to be a process that involves a lot of staff input, community input. I assume it will go through the new equity committee that will come out with something that is presumably a little more tailored to us, or I don't know, something to decide a little more perfect, and that we're using this in the meantime. So if we're not, I assume we're not reconsidering the vote. I don't really get, and I really mean this totally straight and honestly, I don't quite get what we're doing.
Martina, did you want to speak?
Yeah, well, to answer your question, I think that in the discussion that Judy and I had in sort of preparing for this item for information, really one of the things we talked about is that as a board, we need to figure out, like, functionally, how do we use it? Because there's a lot of different ways that we could do that. We could implement a practice where we, assign somebody at every presentation to ask how the equity toolkit was used in the decision making. We could each have it open on our computers or at our desk during discussion. We could say that at any decision we make, we're gonna ask ourselves through out loud all of these questions and have that guide discussion. There's a lot of different options. I'm sure there's ones that I haven't even suggested, but we do need to build it into our practice because different opinions on what that looks like are going to lead to miscommunications about intentions and miscommunications about how it's being employed, and really the way that it is best employed, the way any equity toolkit is best employed is through a consistent practice where the team using it is on the same page and is clear about what we're doing. And so that's really part of what we wanted to do tonight, is ask, like, hey, what does this look like for us? How are we going to implement this? What are we going to do to ensure that we're all using it effectively and that we can be accountable to one another for that?
Thanks.
And the other thing I want to add is that we walked away from that vote and people were confused, and we felt it was important. We didn't want to revisit the vote, but we felt it was very important to have a conversation, make sure we all are thinking the same thing. And I think just in your comments, Gordon, you said, I assumed. Well, I think we all assumed some different things, but not all the same. So I just want us to take a step back, make sure we're on the same page, and then get concrete. So that was part of the purpose too.
Thank you.
Just before we go to Laurel, thank you for having your hand up. Does anyone else want to speak for the first time?
Sure.
Alicia.
Well, I appreciate that we are having the conversation because just from the fact that some people thought the 45-page was included and some didn't, I think that clarity is important. I also want to thank you for this. goes a long way for me to see the draft here and what it really looks like. I know that we're, as a board, we adopted this and we are making a big decision. And so, at our meeting, when we were looking at a firm, we talked about use the lens or what lens you're comfortable with. So, I actually had this and went through it, we'll continue to go through it, but I think, Judy, you asked a lot of very good questions. How will we do it as a board? I think it's easy sitting here with staff when they present something that it should just be in their presentation or, your checklist, budget, maybe even equity, budget, we would expect that on those major decisions, flying new buses, safe routes to school, some of those decisions that come to us, that this would have been used. And I think that is the powerful way, because I know what it was like to be staff, and if I knew the question was coming, I did the work. And in this case, I know people want to do the work, but they need the extra support. I'm not sure how to use not that I'm not sure, because I did look at it, and County did some great work with that word page document. I just want to call them out. And also I just want to call out and say thank you very much for the Lane County staff who reached out to me last 2 weeks ago, Thursday, to let me know it was an oversight and to apologize about that. Anyhow, I don't know that adopting it fully is the best plan, because it's not ours, but certainly using it as a resource is really important, and I'm guessing, Sid, you're doing that, and you get to do that. But the question then that we have power over is, how do we want to do that as a board? So I think that you posed some good questions, Judy, and I appreciate it, and we need to continue to move forward with this.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, my comments are, in looking at the longer document, as I reviewed it, that a lot of this doesn't apply to us, because we're not making these kind of decisions, we're an education institution, so I would hope that as we move forward, perhaps there's training, or perhaps there's fine tuning on this, we can really look at other perhaps school districts or educational institutions, that it's more akin to what we actually do, as we refine and become better adept at using it. And this will sound picky, but I still really have trouble with the 4J version, with the use of term, et cetera, at the end. It's like, call it out. When you use the word et cetera, you're lumping people together one way or the other, and I still don't see anything about indigenous or native peoples.
Great, so we want this to be a work in progress, Mary, so thank you. So everyone had a chance to speak once. Do you want to move on to the second part of the question? I think, Alicia, you had started that conversation about how we will, ideas of how we want to use it. Or Laurel, did you want to say something first?
Well, yes, a tool is either used, equity tool is used and it's foundational to the institution that is using it, or it is not, and then it's performative, it's not part of their work. So we can't kind of use an equity tool. What was put forth in the last meeting about this was that we use this until there's something else finished by the equity committee, which could be part of this, could be something that they find on their own or that they have knowledge about. But the reality is you can't kind of equity. You either are doing it or you're not. And so I really want, as to the next step of the question, is how are we using it? It needs to be part of every presentation. It needs to be, and I like what Alicia said, if it's expected, it's not a surprise, and it's not, extra work. It's just what we do. And the side benefit of that, which you can't quantify easily, is that we keep staff that has seen us missing and has left because it's not been part of our work. But it's hard to count that, right? You don't really know that because it's hard to count it.
but I think there's added benefits to making sure it's foundational to our.
Thank you. So I have Maya and then Alicia. And I just want to say we have 2 minutes left in our 20 minutes, 1 minute left. So does the board want to spend a little more time so we can at least each speak about how we want to be using this? Yeah, getting head nods? Yeah, okay. I think Maya was next and then Alicia.
I think a lot of what I'm hearing kind of supports making sure that we do look to that longer toolkit as a resource. Part of what is really spelled out in the longer version is that this is an equity lens that leads with race. And I think that the value there is something that I've seen the former board as well as this board sign on to when we gave a big contract to Sea Change with a very, very straightforward deal breaker on their part that their process leads with race. That's one of the things when you do, because Mary, we did look at lots of different lenses, just to assure you that it wasn't just something pulled out of the blue, but that's something that you see that's different from the lens that has been left untouched in 4J versus the work that's gone on over the last 5 years. Lenses do have that being the leading community that drives the work. Now, et cetera is a really hard word. I get it. I noticed that there's not language on there also. And to me, that's a really hard one. So I see that, but I also recognize that the use of et cetera is also done in a way to keep the conversation open so that things can be noticed and changed. You know, Alicia and I were talking about how years ago, she told me a story that was not so funny, but she started it by saying, I think back then we just said LGB, and just like watching the terminology grow is to me a beautiful example of how we need to keep ourselves open to making those lists be able to grow. And unfortunately, like Lane County did not see that was omitted. And then on top of that, in our long conversation, Sydney and I didn't see that. And then it wasn't seen until in the middle of the meeting. We didn't have a chance to bring it up beforehand. And that's a problem. But I also think it's one of the things about equity work and one of the things about the conversation that we had, and I'm sure people will bristle at me saying this, but as difficult as our conversation was last week, to me, it was one of the more meaningful conversations I've seen surrounding equity in 4J. We did it in action. We received information, and I want to reiterate my dismay that you, Mary and Alicia, even had to bring this up. Like that doesn't feel good. It's not something that makes me feel proud. But if you look in that equity lens, it says you're going to make mistakes, and you need to make the mistakes without feeling defensive or shame, because if you do, you're not going to move forward. And so I just want to encourage us to continue to listen to each other and to continue to do what Lane County just did, which was say, holy fill in the blank, we totally messed up. Thank you. And this gave us an opportunity to better our lens. So that's one of the ways that I want to use it is trusting each other and being open and being willing to be vulnerable with each other, because ultimately that's going to be the way that the tool is most powerfully used. In terms of a tangible next step, I would like us to consider very soon inviting the folks from Lane County who have indicated a willingness to do so to come in and have a session with us on this tool. I think that being all on the same page, receiving the same information from the same people in the same language is a really, really helpful experience while we're jumping into this.
Thank you. So Alicia was in the queue and then Gordon.
So there's kind of two paths here that I'm seeing. So there's the work that the staff does that brings it to us. And I would say that it's pretty clear that this board is going to be asking, and we should be looking, if you have a checklist, it's just my thought, that that's part of it, that, you know, when you write your memo to us that we get when there's a decision, that has been addressed in the memo. That's what I would hope. And then there's the question, Judy, you posed, and I think it's a little harder to grapple with, is as a board, when we make decisions, and often we make decisions with staff input. But let's take the decision we all talked about today in executive session, affirm. How do we as a board then want to do this? Is it as we did on this one, everybody does it individually? Or when we have a decision, do we do a small group that looks at the equity? And I'm not asking for an answer, but these are the questions I would ask. How are we gonna be most effective as a board? Is it individual? Is it a group? Is it what? And so I know we don't have an answer to that yet, and maybe that is that work session you're talking about, Maya. And again, they don't come up that often, but the big one's coming up. And so let's be prepared for that. So that's my thoughts.
Gordon.
Thank you. I guess I was thinking the same thing that Alicia was just talking about, which is I do think that we should use this and which for me means with like at least all of the list of groups that are included in the longer version of the Lane County one. In choosing a selection of a firm and in choosing a superintendent, and I'm not thinking like in the selection of a firm, I'm not thinking so much of like who is the person going to be, but what is the process going to be in terms of outreach to community, and when we make up the characteristics that we want in a superintendent, that we kind of consciously say, well, we want somebody who will address, who will address these needs or have these voices be brought into the conversation. I think there are people more experienced than me. I don't think we should say we should each just have in our head whatever some equity tool, which I understand why that was made sense as an ad hoc thing in one meeting, but I think it would be better to have agreement on what are the things we're asking. Beyond that, I don't know that it's I'll defer to other people on that, but I think those decisions would be appropriate to use that for.
Thank you. I'm just gonna hop in the queue. That's okay with everyone. I guess I'm the chair, I get to say it's okay. So those were really good comments, and I think what we're grappling with is we did have an old tool and we all acknowledge we never used it. It's because we never really figured out how to use it effectively. So I'm really glad we're having that discussion. To Maya's point of view, we got to learn from our mistakes or the stuff we bumble along with. So I think those are really concrete, good examples, Gordon, walking through it when we're setting up focus groups and how we're gonna do our position description for a superintendent. I think that the tool, after talking to the people who developed it, I think the tool, and I think Superintendent Vanderkar and her staff, and we have this to look at, but they've made it very clear, it doesn't necessarily transfer to every environment, so to just take it carte blanche doesn't make sense, but to make sure it's a resource that we look at first, because someone might have already done some of the hard work. And if not, everything we do, we might say, well, we might have to change this for this educational decision a little bit, let's figure out how we do that. So I just will say that, and then I like Maya's idea, and I just want to add to it, that Lane County did offer to come talk with us, and I would suggest that we do that with staff, whoever you choose, Superintendent Vanderkar, and invite the board so we can hear about how they developed it and their thoughts about how their process. I'd love to hear that. That would be really helpful, and maybe that's something we could all do together. So, okay, did you have your hand up, Laura? Yeah.
I would like to know the specific points where people think this doesn't apply to the work that is done at Forte. I would like to see where it doesn't.
I don't have the tool right here in front of me. I did look at it and I did talk with it. You mean this tool, the 2-pager?
I mean, the questions are the same.
Oh, I'm not saying this doesn't apply. We said we've used this. My comments were directed at the whole toolkit. That's all, with the scenarios.
Oh, well, you're supposed to pick scenarios for the apply anyway.
That's what I was saying.
Okay, well then, I think that was confusing because I had heard you and Alicia say, well, it doesn't, it may not apply, so we need to look at what does. But from what I can see, it does apply, so. We have Are we deciding today, I'd like to know if we're deciding, are we putting forward a motion to ask for a training from Lake County? And are we putting forth a motion to make sure we're using the entirety of the kit and the together?
I have Alicia in the queue. We are having a discussion. We're not gonna do any voting or motion tonight.
Thanks for asking for the clarification.
And we are just giving direction because that's what the process we're in, and so far,
Right.
that's what we're doing. Alicia.
Thanks for asking for the clarification. I was talking about the 45 pager. There are some in there that really meet educational setting, and there's some that would need to be expanded or changed, and we need to add to it. That's all I'm saying. I think this is what we voted on, and this is what we use, and so, yeah, this all makes sense.
Okay, anyone else? Martina?
So I think what would maybe be helpful for me in this moment is, it seems really clear that we have committed that one of the things we're going to do is ask staff as they are making presentations, and that's an expectation that we'll be there moving forward. I would still find it really helpful, and whether that happens tonight or in a future work session, for us to get really specific on how we are intending, like, what about the times when staff isn't making a presentation, or what about the times when staff makes a presentation and then we're deliberating? How specifically are we intending to collectively use this? Because there are multiple ways that could look, and I want to really make sure that we're all on the same page, so that everyone is understanding that they are doing the work together, right? Because if one person thinks that doing it means having it open on their desk and like looking through it and doing it internally, and someone else thinks that the way to do that is externally, then we're gonna have conflict and mismatched expectations, and I really wanna make sure that we avoid that.
Okay, I think, I don't see any more hands, so I'm just gonna summarize where we are. Again, this was a discussion. So Martina, to your suggestion, we should maybe look at a work session on that for the board to figure out how we actually are gonna walk through the process, if that's gonna be in public or how we're gonna do this. And then and just to summarize one last time, that staff are going to be using the 2-pager and using the toolkit as a resource to apply to all their scenarios, and then adding ones for education, seeing what works. But we also know when you do an analysis of policies or issues or things for us to look at, we're gonna ask, we'd like there to be a section that talks about how you use the equity tool in that process. And we're going to invite Lane County to have a conversation. It's not a training, a conversation with us about how they developed the tool and give us some guidance, because they did offer to do that, and we'll do that staff and board together. Okay, Laura.
31 minutes.
Okay, Laura, last comment.
And what is the timeline for that to happen? So can we make sure that it's, because we want this to be the beginning of all this work we have to do this year, not push it off to
We'll ask, I know the superintendent's already started some of the work. Why don't we put in the Friday memo what we're thinking, and we'll reach out to try to get a date before soon. How's that? Okay, we're gonna move on to the next item. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in the conversation. I hope we have a little clearer understanding after that. So we are now on the agenda for items for action. And so our next item is appointing the budget committee members. And we have Carrie Delph to come up and help us talk through the process we're going to use to do this.
As she comes forward, so Carrie and Lisa will be helping count the vote. What I believe is that Lisa will be working with, Ryan and Gordon, and Carrie will use the paper ballots, correct?
That's correct. So I believe all board members are familiar with the process used to select candidates for the budget committee. There are 15 candidates. 12 of them responded with answers to the questions that were asked us of them all questions, and all of them are included in the packet, and all of them are included on the ballot. So Lisa will distribute the first ballot. If board members will each mark their 3 preferred candidates, we'll review and read into the record what board members' preferences were. If we have a nice clear majority without anyone else needed, then we will move forward with that, but we will expect to need additional rounds of voting to either identify additional members or candidates to move forward, or to run off between multiple candidates that have been moved forward. We'll collect your ballots in a moment.
So once we turn in the ballot, I'm going to just say, let's take a 5-minute recess, 5 to 10 minute recess, just to use the restroom. And you can count ballots and carry, okay?
You just need a mark, you don't need 1, 2, 3, right? Just a mark here. No, you just need a mark, okay. So.
It's 8:53. Why don't we come back right at 9, okay? 7 minutes. Before we ask Carrie Duff to read off the results, one thing I should have said in the beginning was to thank all of the applicants for the budget committee. It was just an amazing applicant pool, and honestly, I think every single person that applied has something to bring to the table. So I really, really want to sincerely thank them for their time and energy and efforts and interested in serving on the budget committee for 4J. So I thank you. Okay, do we have some results?
We do, thank you. So having recorded the board's votes, to read into the record what those votes were individually, board members, in alphabetical order again. Alicia.
Go by C.
By C. So Laurel O'Rourke.
No, C, number 1.
Very good, I'm not sure I can do that from memory.
Position, I'm sorry, position.
So Alicia Hayes marked J.C. Berg, Stephen Perrick, and Erica Thesson. Gordon Lafer marked Tom DiLiberto, Jensina Hawkins, and Erica Thesson. Judy Newman marked Jensina Hawkins, Morgan Monroe, Stephen Perrick. Laurel O'Rourke marked Dakota Bullet, Tom DiLiberto, and Erica Thesson. Maya Rabasa marked Dakota Bullet, Tom DiLiberto, and Erica Thesson. Martina Shagrum marked J.C. Berg, Tom DiLiberto, and Erica Thesson. Mary Walston marked Morgan Monroe, Stephen Perrick, and Erica Thesson. If by any chance any of those have been misreported, please let us know. But with those votes, J.C. Berg has 2, Dakota Bullet had support from 2, Tom DiLiberto had support from 4, Jensina Hawkins from 2, Derek Hendricks from 0, Tatinia Howell from 0, Bonnie Middleton from 0, Morgan Monroe from 2, Stephen Perrick from 3, Sean Romine from 0, Courtney Salick from 0, Harry Sanger from 0, Erica Thesson from 6, Jacob True from 0, and Hayden James Julio from 0. So with the planned process for the board to move forward to a second round of voting, what that says is that we have a majority support for two candidates, Erica Thesson and Tom DiLiberto, and they can be moved forward to the slate for the full 3-year terms on the budget committee. The board will need a ballot again to select a third member of the budget committee to fill out the remaining year of the term that was vacated by Maya Rabasa when she became a member of the school board. So that is the term that runs through June 30th of 2022. So to help with this, Lisa will distribute ballots for the second round. We have crossed out, we've removed all candidates who received 0 or 1 votes as planned. There were no candidates who received 1. And I've marked the 2 candidates that received majority support and have already moved forward to the slate. So the remaining candidates are J.C. Berg, Dakota Boulette, Jensina Hawkins, Morgan Monroe, Stephen Perrick. If I said Tom DiLiberto, he's not included anymore. Please select one candidate and return your ballot.
Carrie, can you repeat those for those of us who don't have ballots in front of us?
Yes, thank you so much, Maya. The remaining candidates, and please send your single candidate that you prefer, are J.C. Berg, Dakota Boulette, Jensina Hawkins, Morgan Monroe, Stephen Perrick.
Is there a flash to show?
This program determines like what it, where it is and what is on it and all of those things.
Yeah, this is the.
We do need a plaque though.
You look ready.
Oh, we're ready. We do have the ceremonial. Yeah.
So having received all 7 board members' votes, going backwards, Mary Walston marked Morgan Monroe, Martina Shaver marked J.C. Berg, Maya Rabasa marked Dakota Boulette, Laurel O'Rourke marked Dakota Boulette, Judy Newman marked Stephen Perrick, Gordon Lafer marked Jensina Hawkins, and Alicia Hayes marked Stephen Perrick. That's 1 for J.C. Berg, 2 for Dakota Boulette, 1 for Jensina Hawkins, 1 for Morgan Monroe, and 2 for Stephen Perrick. None of the above have a majority, so we will proceed to ballot again if you'll bear with us for just a minute here.
This is when we interpretive dance.
What did you say?
So it's all the same candidates? No.
So the next step of the process for the third round is that we would remove any remaining candidates who received 0 or 1 votes in this round, and we'll reballot. So again, I'm going to mark off some of them that are no longer in the running and redistribute ballots. So we'll need a moment just to do that.
When I was in school, in 4J, there was a competition that we had attended to us, and
Oh.
we had 11 times.
No.
Yeah, I have it all memorized.
I watched it with Charlie. What do you have memorized?
Oh.
Do you like musicals in general?
I don't know them all. I don't hate them.
I love that. Really.
I did watch Megadoon.
It was so good, right?
Yeah. Especially for people like you that know, oh, like
It's
I know
very-
half of them. Which I can tell I have friends that are like, oh my god. And I can tell you, my partner does not like musicals, and we definitely know that after. Go our boundaries now.
So Lisa will bring around 3 ballots. Again, please select 1 remaining candidate. J.C. Bird, Morgan Monroe, and Jensina Hopkins each received 1 vote and have been removed from consideration, but with that original support. The remaining candidates, please cast your vote for 1, are Dakota Boulette and Stephen Perrick. Thank you for your patience. Alicia Hayes voted for Stephen Perrick, Gordon Lafer for Dakota Boulette, Judy Newman for Stephen Perrick, Laurel O'Rourke for Dakota Boulette, Maya Rabasa for Dakota Boulette, Martina Schaefer for Dakota Boulette, and Mary Walston for Stephen Perrick. So Stephen Perrick has 3 votes, and Dakota Boulette has 4, and would move forward to be the candidate to be appointed to the remaining 1-year term on the budget committee that runs through June 30th, 2022. So when the chair is ready to move forward to the next step, there is a draft motion in your packet filling in those names. The selected slate of candidates is Erica Thesson and Tom DiLiberto for the full terms, and Dakota Boulette for the partial term.
Okay, with Martina, would you make a motion, please?
Yes, so I move to appoint Tom DiLiberto and Erica Thesson to the budget committee for terms beginning immediately and ending June 30th, 2024, and appoint Dakota Boulette for a term beginning immediately and ending June 30, 2022.
Do we have a second? Okay, Martina's made the motion and Laurel has seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye. Okay, the motion, I'm not seeing Maya. Okay, good. The motion passes unanimously with a 7-0 vote.
And if I may, this was so challenging because every one of the applicants is a wonderful and caring member of the community, and we just appreciate everyone for applying, and I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we hated having to choose.
Well said, thank you. Okay, and congratulations to the new board, the new budget committee members. Now we are going to move to, the second item was to, items for action is selecting the executive search firm. And we have had interviews with 2 firms, and we've checked references, and we talked about those in our executive session before this meeting. And we have decided that we really need a little more information. And I'm going to ask someone on the board to make a motion so we can discuss that.
Great. All right, I have 2 motions, so I'll start and then we can discuss and move on to the second. So I move that we initiate a second interview process with the 2 finalist search firms.
Do I have a second? Maya seconds. Okay, so Martina moves and Maya seconds. And now for discussion. Any comments, questions? Oh, go ahead, Laurel, go ahead.
Do we need to add to the motion, which I didn't, so parameters around this? So, because as we know, if we don't do parameters, then we're not.
Do you want me to read my second motion also? Just so that you'll know. Sorry.
I just wondered when we're gonna have to get to that.
I'll read this second motion, but of course, since we're still discussing the first motion, I'm not yet moving it. Sorry, y'all. So the second motion will be to refer creation of questions for those interviews to the subcommittee. Yeah, based on the conversation that we had during executive session.
Does that do it, Laurel? Good, okay. So let's, any other discussion on the first motion, the motion that's on the table? Then let's move it to vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand and say aye. Okay, it passes 7 votes yes. All those opposed, same sign. No, okay, so 7 yeses and the motion passes. And now we'll have the second motion.
Okay, so now I'm actually moving that we refer the creation of questions for these interviews to the subcommittee based on the discussion from the executive session.
You do mean the existing subcommittee?
Yes, I do mean the existing subcommittee that has already been constituted.
Do I have a second?
Gordon, Maya, and Alicia, right?
Yeah, Gordon, Maya, and Alicia.
Yes. I'd like to modify.
First you have to second the motion. Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Great, thank you. Martina made the motion and Mary seconded it. Now we have a discussion.
Laurel has a friendly amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to modify that, somehow it said that the same questions will be asked to both parties, both entities. I just think clarification is helpful here.
So
for
is that, we're making an amendment, so the amendment is that that you're asking the committee to develop questions that ask the same ones to both firms?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second on the amendment?
I don't think I can.
Maya, are you seconding it?
Yes.
Okay, Laurel moved and Maya seconded the amendment. Any conversation about the amendment?
Could you clarify what it is again? It was a long rambling statement.
That was amending the motion to say the questions that the committee develops will be the same, that will ask the same questions to both firms. They'll develop one set of questions and ask it to both groups. Alicia, I see you, yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, I'll support that. I just wanna say that's kind of been our practice, so if anybody's wondering if we've done something different, no, we haven't, but I appreciate that we're providing that clarity.
So, I'm gonna read aloud what I think would be, an amended motion that would get at your friendly amendment, which would be, that we refer the creation of questions to the subcommittee based on the discussion from the executive session, with instructions that one set of questions be developed for both interviews.
Great. Then I'm gonna call for Mary.
Well, we're gonna vote on the amendment to the original motion, or is that a friendly amendment?
That would
be. I'm just confused.
Okay, it was set up as a friendly amendment, which I believe we would vote on that.
Friendly amendment, the nature of the motion says, yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, given that it sounds to me like we're all on the same page for the friendly amendment, and I have no problem amending my original motion, I think that's in keeping with the spirit, so if that is okay, then we could skip, voting on the amendment itself and just vote on the full amended motion. I hope I'm doing Robert's rules right.
Yeah, that sounds great. And am I seeing anyone that is that doesn't want to accept that as a friendly amendment? Then why don't you read the motion one last time?
All right, so I move that we refer the creation of questions to the subcommittee based on the discussion from the executive session, with instructions that one set of questions be developed for both interviews.
Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay, 7 votes for yes, it passes unanimously. Alicia.
Just to follow up on the discussion, last time, where is he, Gordon, pulled the team together, and I'm just kind of curious if that's gonna happen again, or if somebody else should. And sorry to take time here, but given I don't see Gordon on my screen.
He's up there.
No, you're not on my little screen. Are you good with that, Gordon, or do you want someone else?
I actually couldn't, it was too fuzzy. I couldn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Last time, you were the one that pulled together and made the meeting. I think I made the first one, you made the second one. Are you gonna be the one, the convener? Are you good with that? All right, thanks. That's all, no business.
All right, we are moving along to items for action at a future meeting. And the first item is approve a resolution encouraging solidarity and support for student identities. So I'll just start by framing what this topic is. The State Board of Education passed a resolution that was encouraging solidarity and support for student identities. And they asked that local school districts consider passing a resolution that was has a similar sentiment to that. And so Martina and I, a while ago, looked at that resolution and worked together to create a draft, which is in your packet. It says draft 10/2021, resolution encouraging solidarity and support for student identities. And we took what the state board said, but there was a lot in it that really needed to be adapted and changed for a school district. It was not at the state level. So I would like to hear people's thoughts on this.
And of course, this is an item for action at a future meeting, so we won't be voting tonight. This is really a first read, though it's been on our agenda for 3 meetings now.
Yes. And let me just point one thing out, and then Mary, I'll get to you. So there were a couple things that we added that were different from the state board. When you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4th whereas, and the 6th whereas, we put in any public pre-kindergarten, elementary, or secondary education. We added pre-kindergarten. Our district has some pre-kindergarten programs as well, so we thought it was appropriate to do that. That was not in the state board's resolution. I want to point that out. And then the state board uses the language "every student belongs." Our initiative that we undertook was before they changed their wording, and we used all students belong. And so there are 2 places in here that's highlighted and thought it would be worth talking about whether we want to change our wording to every student belong and do our initiative that way, just align the wording to get people's thoughts. And the other thing we added was the very last whereas. We added that was not a mistake. It was about students with disabilities creating a safe, inclusive environment. That was not one of the bullets. We added that. Then we added, I think, the number 3 on the resolution as well, about Indigenous, for Indigenous students and students of color and families. So those are additions. Okay, Mary.
Well, maybe this is an oversight, but it says item for action at a future meeting, second reading, so it should be first reading, because as you recall the last meeting, this item was not dealt with because of time. So I'm not opposed to it, I'm not opposed to what it's trying to do, or I would suggest some different language changes, but I would hope we can at least take the time to have a discussion. I don't know that we need to vote on it tonight, and I hope that's not the plan.
No, it's for future.
Okay, I know, but
Yeah.
Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
And is this gonna be the discussion, or are we gonna, I would prefer to have it in a work session, but it's very hard to have a conversation up here. That's why.
This was planned to be the discussion.
Okay.
And I don't know, it would be a while before we get a work session, so let's start a discussion if we feel like we need a work session on it.
Good, get through my papers, because I had some comments on it. Go ahead.
Alicia.
I won't be wordsmithing it, but I will be saying thank you both so much. I know how long and how much more you're working in leadership these days than maybe you had planned. I appreciate the additional words, the additional sections you put in, hopefully maybe the state will add them. And I also would, unless there's a reason not to, support aligning our language.
Maya.
I appreciate you bringing up the language of the local initiative and then the every student belongs. I would even encourage us to I think that they're complementary and related and connected, but also very distinct. And I would encourage us to use language that really separates them and makes them not easily confusable. I've heard people conflating them or else like referring to one thinking they're referring to the other. So that just, and maybe that's a bigger conversation, but I think that, and we can't change every student belongs. I don't think that they're gonna agree with our district being like, change it for the whole state. So I encourage us to maybe think of something that that might not be so close, because I know it's confusing, not just in this document, but in outside conversations as well.
So are you suggesting we use different language than every student belong in the resolution we're looking at?
Well, I mean, if we're referring to the state mandate, then we have to use every student belongs. I'm suggesting that our local initiative might be better served with a new name, both in the document and in general. So I was glad you brought it up because it's relevant to this conversation, but also relevant to the greater work.
So changing both of the wordings, is that what you're saying?
Sorry. It's okay. It's probably me. I'm not super well and my brain is fried. So no, what I'm saying is that we can't touch the name of the state mandate. That's every student belongs. That's non-negotiable. What we can do to make the document more easy to distinguish between those is change our local initiative's name.
Oh, okay.
And as a general rule in conversations outside of this document, there's a lot of overlap and confusion and conflation of the two. And I think it would benefit the initiative to have its own distinct name so that they don't get, woven together unnecessarily.
So we'll bring that up later, but in terms of this resolution, leaving every student belong works for you. Yes, okay. Was there someone else had their hand up? Mary?
Okay, I found my copy, and I just think, I appreciate the work, it's good work. I think you could make it a little stronger if you actually cite our previous resolutions and policy, like in the third paragraph. You know, you can specifically talk about what we've already done, say we're working on this and we want to implement this new policy, this new resolution. And then in the fifth paragraph, fifth whereas, it says whereas it is the policy of the Eugene 4G school board, I would actually cite the policy again, just to give it a little more teeth. And then something really picky, you need in the next paragraph, at the very end, it says pre-kindergarten through 12th grade students. I think it should be pre-kindergarten through grade 12 students. Okay, and I think the more specificity in the policies and procedures resolution you already have, this adds more strength to this.
So if you look at the third whereas from the bottom, we do cite our one resolution.
We have the resolution on gender non-conforming, what it is, but that's about 3 years old. I think that might be helpful to mention that.
Okay, I will look to see other ones, I would love to
Remember
know
right now,
this, okay, thank you.
I'm fine with other than that.
Other people have comments? So I would say you're gonna probably see this then in our next meeting for a action, for voting. With, we'll add citations, and we'll add some of the edits that Mary suggested, and leave every student belongs in there, and pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, grade 12. Okay? Thank you, all right. So now we are going to consider revisions to school calendar. We have Superintendent Vandergaard on that one.
Thank you, Board Chair. All right, so we have a request, as you've already heard from me in my opening statement, to have additional work days for our staff, but non-instruction days for the students. And we've chosen November 24th, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because in the past it has been a day where we normally do not have a lot of attendance by students and sometimes by staff. And we don't have enough subs as it is, so if someone doesn't come to work, it is possible we would be able to cover the class. And then the second day we chose was January 14th, which is a Friday. And it is the Friday before the Martin Luther King Monday day off, so if people wanted, parents wanted a 4-day weekend, then we were trying to maybe create something where they could use it in bigger fashion. But January 14th is also in the second term, so for trimesters at high school, it's important that we try to keep the days in each trimester similar, so that if you're teaching 2 of the same classes, there's the same amount of days that you use for your agendas. So we have November 24th, day before Thanksgiving, and it is all to support our staff to get caught up on their regular work. So we've been doing COVID work on top of what our normal assignments are, and it is especially important in our operations, so that'd be transportation, nutrition services, and custodial. And then on top of that, you've heard from the union that the teachers need additional time as well. So that is the request. It is the first read, and the intent is for you to vote on it next time. We have already sent out the proposal to both staff and parents so that they can start planning for it. Not saying that you've decided, but that it would be at the board meeting. And you know that they received it because you started getting emails. So. Any questions? Laurel.
Information that I would like around attendance.
for the day before Thanksgiving would be from each school. What that looks like, and what I'm looking for is the difference of socioeconomic, how it hits different people from different, levels.
Any other questions, Martina?
Well, I'm gonna practice what we were talking about earlier, and Superintendent, I would love to hear how the equity lens was used in making this decision.
So we did discuss who this would affect, and we have a number of different people that it affects. So it affects staff, and then it also affects students and families. And what is hard to determine is who would attend school on the Wednesday. So we did run into some issues when we were trying to work through who it would affect the most. And as a building principal, only in 3 different schools, I do know that there's a low attendance, and I would say that Laurel has a point, that it could be the SES of the school that determines the attendance rate. But we also know that we have a staff attendance rate as well that affects the business of the day. And that wouldn't be by SES, but that would be just by what staff needs to get done. And so when we looked at it, I would say that it was hard to apply the equity lens only because there were so many facets to it. And that is what we need to practice. But for transportation, that's the biggest one for me. It's that we also service other districts' buses, and we're just behind. So we're holding up not only our district, but the other districts. So in the equity lens, it seems like we need to, we will have some time for our mechanics to work on buses. So it was bumpy and it wasn't pretty, but we're trying, so.
Other questions? Maya.
Thank you. I think like many of us on the board, we're probably, coming off of hearing from EEA about the tremendous burden that our teachers are carrying, and I can only imagine that we would hear similar results if we had a similar survey offered to us from OSEA. So I'm here to make sure that we do whatever we can to support our teachers and our staff and to get the work done that we're hearing. What, 98% of teachers are working beyond their contract hours. And that means that stuff is not getting done. So I appreciate having, I think you said 5.5 hours, which is a tremendous amount of time, although not nearly as much as, would be, in an ideal world, they could have even more. However, I am concerned about our working families, and I'm wondering, I feel really comfortable with the January date, without a doubt. And I'm wondering, I believe at least one email asked if we could make it so that the dates are at least 30 days out notice. And I know for me that Wednesday before Thanksgiving strikes me as a perfect day, but that's my very specific family structure and situation. And that 30 days might make a huge difference for folks who need to find childcare. I'm also wondering if there's any way that we can find a way to alleviate the childcare burdens that folks have on these new days that they didn't plan for. I know of families who they have to ask for their days off. I know one family, for example, the wife is a teacher in Bethel and the husband is a helicopter paramedic, and he asks for his days at the beginning of the year and he puts them all from the school calendar in, and after that he can't change them. She's in Bethel, she can't change hers. So I'm just wondering is if we can try to imagine a way where for families that absolutely need childcare, can we partner with people? Can we recruit from our classified staff? I just want us to try to see how we can meet the needs of our teachers and staff who are very much in need of this time, as well as our families who are very much in need of us being consistent with what we have on our calendar. So January feels like it's safe because it's down the line, but the November one makes me a little nervous for a lot of families. But again, I fully support finding a way to designate this time without students so that our staff can get what they need taken care of.
So thank you, Maya. I'm gonna just step in. I mean, this is one of those situations where it's a very difficult choice, because whatever choice we make is helping one group and hurting potentially another, making it really challenging. I just want to acknowledge that as someone who was a single parent, this would have like thrown me in a tizzy with my two kids. So and I hear, as you said, we listened to the survey, we're hearing some of the repairs may not be able to maintenance, you know, we all know if we don't keep up our buses, we're gonna have a bigger problem down the road. And as you said, we didn't have that survey with our classified staff. So it is just one of those super tough choices. And I originally went to, can we provide childcare? Can we do something? But then that's a whole nother task for staff to do when they're really trying to catch up. It's just adding to the plate. So I don't know exactly how to handle that. I'm just saying that I'm gonna support this because I think we have many crises, and I just want to acknowledge that I know it's really a hardship, and I would like us to get, if there's some creative ways without creating more work for staff. Laura.
Kind of an answer to what you're saying, the differences aren't the same. Staff are adults, and while it's hard and difficult, what we know and what I know is in social work is kids will be left home alone. So one is, it's hard and we need to figure out something. That's our work, that's what we need to do. But also, if we spring this on people, there are repercussions from that. So it's not just like, well, we just have to pick something and it's hard. It's like, and I'm sorry if you hear emotion in my voice, but that is knowing and meeting these kids that have been left home alone because there's just nothing, there is no resource to help them. If we can provide that resource, then it's okay. And we're taking care of a lot of people. If we're just saying we can't do it, and I hope it works out for you, then it's not okay. And that's my motivation around that, because as also a working mom, now teenagers, they don't want me around, but before, you know, I would have to figure something out, and I'd be scrambling, and believe me, I have used 4J's name in vain because of this. And the reason I ran, partly what I ran, was like, we need to be heard and to be acknowledged how hard it is for parents from a lower socioeconomic to take care of these things. There is no, I got this, or grandma has this, or, you know, people with a lot of money can take care of it. People with even some money can usually take care of it. People with men have to make really horrible decisions, and it's not kind.
So what I would try to do is I could go back to the team, see if we can see if something in December works. I will get the data for the attendance from the schools and see if we can stick with it. I know we talked about a couple of December dates, but they were elusive to us as to how they would work. So let me go back and figure out if we can switch the November 24th to something, and we'll leave the January 14th right where it is. I hear you. I also am hearing the staff, so I'm trying to problem solve the issues that that are being shared with me, but I hear you about parents and needing more time to set up childcare.
Maya.
I just want to say in the moment, thank you, Sydney, for hearing that, both sides of it. And I know that you're working on that, and I really, really appreciate it. I feel as though we have the chance to kind of make it work well for both sides of the equation. And I'm feeling very appreciative that you're willing to go back and look at the other dates. I know that from a clean and tidy perspective, that Wednesday is just super easy to grab onto. But I think that looking in December might be a really nice compromise, and I appreciate that, because I also want to make sure we get those 2 days for the work that needs to get done, and also to alleviate some stress and to say we hear you, we see you, and we got you.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent? Laurel?
I just add one, is it a possibility that we could add more? Is this being looked at, that we can add more and then we could plan it in ahead of time for our staff? Because it's obviously a need.
I think that there's some hope that we're on the upside of the pandemic, and we're also knowing that we're getting reports that we're gonna have some weather. So we're trying to work in all the ways that we might be needing to use some days. So we could put together something. We've given up 2 days. One was students and one that had planned PD. So we've already done 2, and this would be 3 and 4. So you heard that Bethel did 5 and 6 only because they did some shifting with elementary and then secondary. So the 5 and 6 is just because it's not an easy little package. So yes, and we would need to use the credits if we added more. Okay,
Maya?
I promise this is my last thing on this, and I assume and take it for granted, but just want to say it out loud, that when we are looking at those December dates, I know it makes it more complicated because Hanukkah starts on the 28th and it's for 8 days. And I just want to make sure that that's also just said so that we are aware, myself included, that we're asking you to do something tricky with that December request.
Just so everyone knows, that's November 28th, and it goes through the beginning of December, just in case anyone was confused. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, let's move on to the last item we have, which is an item for future action at a future meeting, which next meeting we'll have to vote on the OSBA election, and there's two seats that are up. One is the OSBA board representative from our region, and the other is the OSBA policy and legislative representative. And you have the information in your packet. Linda Hamilton has been on the board. She's on Lane Estee's board. She has someone running against her from our region. And I've been on the policy legislative committee, and we have another person running against me. So we will be voting on that as a board at our next meeting, which is November 17th. Any questions?
Well, I was just gonna say that Carrie's in the audience and she can answer questions, but I wanna make it very clear that the board votes as a whole for one person. So they'll vote twice, once for the board of directors position and then for the LPC position. But it's one vote and the board votes on which one. I guess there's 4 choices, but that's what they need to do, and it needs to be done by December 17th, and so it'd be better to vote next time just so that we can get it turned in. Carrie, do you have anything to add to that?
I did ask a question of OSBA today. I haven't gotten a response yet because it's interesting to me. So the policy, OSBA represents community colleges and K-12 schools, and so that I think they have some different policy issues. So I wasn't really sure why we, that it's possible that there's no community college reps or there's a lot, so I tried to get some clarification on why those aren't separate. I'll just say that, that was confusing to me.
I think they have a whole community college caucus.
But they don't have a separate, it's possible to have no one appointed, is what I'm saying, when they do it, yeah. Okay, then, I'd say that's the last item on our agenda tonight, except are there items that we want, suggestions, considerations for future meeting agenda items? Mary?
I would, I know we've talked about the community benefits agreement, the CBA. We sort of had conversations that I think are here and there and kind of hit and miss. I still have some questions about it, and I would admonish us not to just borrow from Lane County. I think that's probably not the best thing to do. And that we actually dig a little bit deeper into, so I'm requesting a work session on the community benefits agreement.
It's gonna be on the agenda next meeting, and if we could schedule a work session, I guess before, depending on when we get our interview scheduled, we'll consider, we'll take it to leadership.
Okay, because I had posed a question to you and the superintendent and did not hear back on that. So, the other question, I have two other requests too, so I'm assuming since it's on the calendar, we don't need to do head nods, which is fine. We've had in the past, like a work session on the goals, just to clarify what is it, what do we need, or what's the level of effort that we're all putting to put forward. So I would request that we have a conversation on what the goals mean. And then at that same work session, I'll make another suggestion, but I just think it's important to clarify what we mean. The goals are all students belong initiative, which I think we're working on, North Eugene Regional Plan, the equity events, which we've done a lot of work on already, the climate change and community communications, and the last two are the ones that are probably less familiar to me in terms of what our intent is and what we hope to gain by that. So we request that we have a work session on goals, and then a second request that we have a work session on our work around climate change, because I think that's really important. As I mentioned earlier, I met with the city of Eugene. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as a district to take a leadership role in partnering with them. So that's my request. Thank you.
So, should we get head nods for the work session on goals first?
That would be my preference.
Okay, so who also would support a work session on goals? We have two people, anyone else? Did we lose Gordon?
Yes.
Yeah, he signed off the time change.
4 o'clock in the morning for him.
Okay, and then the request for the work session on climate change. And do we have one,
May I ask, Mary, just thinking about the calendar and the work that's gonna be upcoming for the superintendent search, would it be acceptable to you for those, if those work sessions were calendared in the new year? Are you hoping that they'll be immediate? Because I think my nodding of my head is dependent on the speed of your request, because I'm not sure we can meet.
Did you say immediate?
Yeah.
doesn't go to leadership to plan,
Right,
I'm
right.
assuming.
I'm just sort of trying to get.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be immediate. Were you calling on me? Was it sure?
Well, I was asking you
Oh, no, it
specifically.
doesn't have to be
Yeah.
immediate. I just want to see it on the agenda at some point, because I think it's a big topic. I think we have a lot of things we could be doing. I think the staff are really busy. I think it's stuff that we could talk about where we want to go, and more creating a frame in terms of policy work that the board can do, and not turning around to staff and saying, do this for us, do this for us. So that's, if it's on the calendar at some point, we would appreciate it.
Earl, did you have a question for Mary?
No, it's just a statement to say, I would agree with both of those things, but I wasn't realizing that was an option to be like, because I think we talked about at our retreat that we would have a meeting again about our goals as well, because we, at some point, we gotta be like, where are we on this, what are we doing? And we also know that the climate is part of those goals, so yes, but I'm so overwhelmed by what we need to get done for January that I'm like, I don't see a space for that.
So, I would say, I'm not a no, I'm a later.
Well, I think, so let's go back then. I think when we're not saying it's gonna be tomorrow or immediately, I think it's whether there's support to have this on the agenda. So, and leadership's gonna have to figure out when, understanding the priorities with everything, so.
Our working agreement says you just have to get the agreement, have you guys, have leadership consider it,
Yes.
and then it gets on the calendar at a time that works for everybody.
That's the process. So given that, do you want to look again then at, do we have 3 people who are interested in the goals? We have 2, and Laurel's, okay, good. And we have 3 people already that said for climate, so we're good. Those will be looked at with leadership. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else have something to bring up? Maya.
So in the summer, I'm gonna get this wrong, summer of 2020, right after 4J board voted to remove SROs. So that was 2020, right? Okay, I was about to eat a whole year. A group of community members and local educators got together to start doing some work outside of the work that the All Students Belong has been doing, to think about what they're referring to as a strengths-based expansion of safety. And they put together a report after a year of working together. And this includes folks from Hoots, 4J admin, parents, former 4J teachers. And they put together kind of a comprehensive vision. And it seems like, and I shared this with Judy and Martina in August, asking about maybe including it in next steps, but it seems like it might be a really good time. I'm hearing a lot of talk about suicidal ideation and a lot of talk about mental health challenges amongst our students and also amongst our teachers. And it feels like it might be worthwhile inviting this group in as an item for information to share out the work that they have done together. They've continued to meet as well. So I would like to propose that we invite them in sooner than later, so that we can also continue our momentum with the work that since Sea Change's last report, when their contract ended, it's been kind of standing still. But I think that it would be really timely in terms of also in helping us to see things from a perspective that is very trauma informed and mental health supportive.
So Maya, we are signing a contract for the next steps with Sea Change now. And I think my suggestion, rather than having parallel efforts, to ask Sea Change to include that in the work. So to make sure that that gets included in that timeline and process, rather than having parallel things going on.
So can you just explain what that would look like then, if it's included in the work?
Well, I think those are the things they're looking at, and we could ask them to include this group in the outreach and in their process. Laura.
Please stop me if I'm wrong, it's very different to have a group present to the board as opposed to just being part of the Sea Change group. I get very concerned that certain parts of this work, the all goes to one little section and it must remain there. So I would love to hear this information and have it be presented to the board and the public.
So Laura,
or the Sea Change asks for things to be presented to the board.
Yes, they present, they do update, they could bring that group and we could say to them that we would like to hear this information as part of it. I just worry about having separate presentations and separate, I'd like to bring that group that work together.
So just to clarify, sorry, I don't mean to annoy you, but just to clarify, that what you're saying is that it would eventually make its way into our public space, meaning either at a meeting or at a work session, as opposed to into a document that Sea Change presents to us.
Yeah, they will be working and talking with us about that, and we can ask them to include that and include that group information and presentation. It could be that specific.
Okay.
Okay, Laurel?
Does somebody else have a question? And so, just to make sure I understand, because I came after sea change and just saw the presentation, and I'm kind of catching myself up on all the work that has come beforehand. You're saying there's like a title at the top with sea change, and they're going to be presenting and working with all of these different things, and if we keep it all together, it'll be easier for us to know that work is, we won't miss something won't be lost in the shuffle or per se.
Well summarized, Laurel, yes.
I just don't.
Yeah, that's very good. That's exactly what I was saying. Thank you. Sid.
Maya, you may have sent this to me and I just missed it or it got lost, but could you send me the report? I don't know that I read it.
I would be super happy to send it to you. Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah, and then I think the part that probably concerned me, and I know no one asked my opinion, but how do we determine who comes before the board and who is the right person to come before the board, the right group that comes before the board, because there are a lot of people that want your attention. And so I think that the board probably needs to put some guardrails on who gets to make a public presentation, because you'll have a lot of people who want to do it, so.
Okay, so are we okay with moving ahead? And so I will sit, I mean, Maya, I'm gonna ask you also, I'd have to find a copy. I do remember reading it and seeing it, but I wanna be sure Sea Change has it and letter, and, or maybe, I'll just copy you so you can send it.
Friday memo, maybe?
Or Friday memo, perfect. Laura.
I just want to say in answer to the guardrails is that, I mean, when she mentioned that, she mentioned food, she mentioned board admin, she mentioned teachers, she mentioned parents. So if people who are stakeholders in our community are part of a group and want to present, I hope we are saying, yes, please. And even if we don't love everything that's said, I think it's important that we allow the dialogue, because it's so important for people to be heard. That's what I just want to say to that.
Okay, so I think.
I just have a question. I don't know if I need to ask again or just get an update. Last week, it did get 3 head nods to have Mika from the Education Justice Action Team come in and talk about the work she's done researching racial harassment policies in other Lane County schools. Did that get discussed at leadership and scheduled at a certain time?
It did not get discussed at leadership yet, so it will be on Monday.
Okay, great.
Okay, anything else? So I'm going to say that the meeting for board meeting is adjourned.